1. This whole story started when I was toward the end of 6th grade, but affects me even now as a college student. In 6th grade, I was a very average kid, decent grades, small circle of friends, highly introverted. One day, one of the members of our school's COMLEC, Commission on Elections, went to our classroom and said something along the lines of, "Hey, whoever wants to run independent, not under any party, for this upcoming school election, and get a position on the school council, get this folder which contains all important information regarding campaigning, elections, etc." The only position available for our batch was grade 7 batch rep, which means you represent the whole of grade 7 the next school year. All of a sudden, it was like a light bulb went in my head. I wanted to run for batch rep. Despite my introverted nature, I always had the best interest at heart for the batch, and I was never in any major case prior, but apparently back then, that's all it took for me to grab a folder and look into how I can start my campaign. A few weeks pass, and me officially running for batch rep is now public. Of course, I had my small circle of friends showing me unconditional support, but I had batchmates who literally went to my face and said, "Oh, P, I forgot you existed," or, "Hey, I'm not going to vote for you because I don't like you." I'm sorry, but did I assault your parents or spit on your food? I know what I'm doing was very much out of character, but I felt like having the audacity to tell someone that is absolutely crazy. I ended up not winning, and honestly, I kind of expected that. I was going against the valedictorian and the biggest nepo baby in the batch, so I had no shot. Fast forward to 7th grade itself, and because of me running, I am now somehow relevant and existing in the batch, and unfortunately, that resulted in bullying. Because I pushed myself into the spotlight of the school, and with the way I was treated, it was like I was forced to become an introvert to an extrovert in a matter of days, and as a result, I became socially awkward and cringe. That became the main factor why I was bullied, so I returned to my introverted phase, but even more reserved, submissive, and awkward. Every day was another day of me being treated like a punching bag, and in case you're wondering, I brought this up to my parents, and they brought it up to my principal, and the principal didn't do a thing. A lot of empathy platitudes like, "Hey students, stop bullying." No action whatsoever. Remember those horrible things that some of my batchmates said to me? Well, in the election for that school year, those same people actually had the nerve to ask me, "Hey LP, why aren't you running?" What the hell? Even if I truly knew what I was getting myself into, how do I answer someone when they ask me that question when they didn't even vote for me? Hell, openly stated weeks before voting that they would not vote for me. All in all, grade 7 was a very depressing school year for me, and it wasn't any better in grade 8. The online pandemic years were a double-edged sword. I didn't have to meet my batchmates who made my life a living hell, but I also couldn't talk to my friends as often. In fact, one of my best friends fell out with me, mainly because of how I was treated, and apparently it was ruining his image in the batch. Another grain of salt in the wound. I guess it was fortunate for me that things got better in grades 11 and 12. I don't know if it was because people matured or people moved on, or both, but I was happy that the grade 7 treatment was gone. It's been about 6.5 years since grade 7, and as mentioned at the start of this story, I am currently in college, but since my spontaneous running for batch rep student that has actually messed with my confidence level for so long, I never took any leadership opportunities and I avoided any socialization outside of my friend group. In fact, that led me to talk a lot of crap behind people's back. As euphoric as that felt in the moment, I never liked that, but every day, part of me wished I never ran, and I stayed very average and very introverted, because that caused me little to no problems at the very least. No problems to the extent of what I faced in grade 7. Hellfreezer's note, I'm so sorry you went through that, but the fact of the matter is, the people who chose to bully you would never have had the courage to do so in your place. The fact that you, someone who had been quite introverted at that point, could step up and put yourself forward like that, reminded them of what cowards they were. If that's something you feel the desire to do now, as it sounds like you might, you should try again. And I think generally people in college will be a little bit more mature, and I don't think your fellow students in college will act quite as immaturely as the people when you were in grade school. 2. For context, I am pet sitting this weekend, a 3-year-old Chihuahua, and an inside-outside cat. Earlier this week, I met the owner, a family friend, and both pets, and the introduction went well. The Chihuahua, Nala, of course, made a big scene when I got there, but the owner said she calmed down relatively quickly compared to when meeting other strangers, and we took things very slowly the rest of the visit. She sniffed me a few times but never let me touch her. Still, overall a win for a Chihuahua, right? When I got here today, I let her out of her crate and offered treats as instructed. She wouldn't take them and instead ran over to the door and began barking and whining, which I had been told was the signal to let her out. Now, this was when I had the realization that Nala wasn't wearing a collar, nor was there any leash in sight. I remember that the owner never mentioned either of those, and that when she let her outside, the dog was off leash. So I decided to just let her out, mistake number 1. Instead of turning right towards the backyard, she turned left, scampering into the driveway. I followed her and thankfully remembered the owner mentioning that Nala loves car rides. So I opened my rear driver's side door, and she immediately hopped inside. Success. I then gave her a few minutes to settle down, while I brought all my stuff inside. Twice I offered her a treat, just placing it on the seat next to her, but she refused both of my olive branches, leaving them there to send me a message. The message was clearly received, and all it said was F you. Now, this is where I very naively underestimated how upset and afraid she was. By this point, it had been several minutes of her barking her tiny head off in my back seat, and I didn't want the neighbors to think I was attempting to steal this dog. So I just decided I was going to try to grab her and carry her inside. Like, I really thought she was just going to struggle and bark the whole time, and that it would be loud and mostly fine. Nope, the second I reached towards her, mistake number 2, she chomped down in my hand, so I backed up, rolled the car windows down a bit, and closed the doors while I went inside to clean up my hand. She definitely broke skin, but honestly not bad as far as dog bites go. While inside, I thoroughly washed my hand with soap and warm water. I then called both my boyfriend and best friend for moral support, calmed down a bit, and looked around for the thickest blanket I could find. Once I found my blanket, weapon of choice, I worked up the nerve for what I had to do next. I then calmly but confidently strode out to the side of my car she was sitting on, opened the door, threw the blanket over the top of her. There was certainly a struggle. God, I wish someone had been there to video me wrestling a thrashing Chihuahua under a blanket. But managed to secure the blanket around her and carry her back inside without sustaining any further injuries. It's been a few hours since the incident and she still won't come near me, but in general, all is well. I haven't made any advances, just calmly moved about the house, making dinner, doing laundry, and now watching TV in the living room. She has mostly sat on top of the couch, looking out the window, like a wife wondering when her husband will return from war, and occasionally whimpering. Despite the rough start, I do have hope she'll warm up to me as the weekend progresses. I've dog sat plenty of times, but never a Chihuahua, or any aggressive type dog. So any tips from those with experience are welcome. 3. So this happened over 10 years ago, but I was reminded of this story the other day and thought I'd share. For context, I am looking for a new doctor and requested my file from my old doctor and was going through it just out of curiosity, and saw a note saying that I had a history of smoking. And honestly, I have only ever smoked once in my life and was so confused as to why this was on my chart. Until I saw the date it was added, which was my 18th birthday, or also the day I broke my leg. Just for some background info, I was raised in a very conservative Catholic family, and taught very young to never drink or do drugs or to smoke, especially if underaged. But smoking was very heavily emphasized due to my grandmother, who used to heavily smoke, and now had several health problems because of it. And I was such a little goody two-shoes that of course I would never even think about doing such things. My Catholic guilt was in top form at this time, and the thought of disobeying my mom left me too anxious to function. My friend also grew up in a similar family, but was a little more rebellious than me. Nothing crazy, but she picked up on smoking from her older sister, and would have her sister buy her cigarettes for her since she was only 17. This was when the law said you had to be 18, by the way. Well, on the day of my 18th birthday, my friend and I were hanging out after school, and she offered me a cigarette. And since I was technically legal now, I said, what the heck? Let's at least give it a try. It won't hurt to try just one. So I smoked like half a cigarette before giving it back to my friend because, honestly, it was gross, and I did not see the appeal at all. Well, less than an hour later, we were rollerblading through the park when a little kid runs in front of me. I went to quickly dodge him, only for me to step onto a crack that was big enough for the wheels of my rollerblade to get wedged in. My foot was truly stuck, but thanks to the laws of physics, my body kept going, while my foot stayed in place, until I heard some loud cracks and fell. I think I went into shock right after, because the only thing I remember after that was telling my friend to call for an ambulance because I was pretty sure I just broke my leg. I did, in fact, just break my leg, in 3 places to be precise. I remember arriving at the hospital by myself because my friend wasn't allowed with me, and I was super anxious because they were asking me for my medical history and telling me that I would probably need surgery to repair it. And I was like, can we wait for my mom to get here? Like, yes, I'm technically an adult, and I should probably know the answers to these questions, but I've only been a legal adult for less than 12 hours. And so far, it has not been a great experience. Give me a break, please. Also, I'm in a lot of pain and can barely think because of it. By the time my mom has made it to the hospital, I was hooked up to an IV and was given some morphine. And boy, was it showing. I remember crying to her about how sorry I was to have bothered her while she was at work, and sorry for making her leave early to come take care of me. Bless my mom, because she just comforted me and told me there was nothing to be sorry about, and that of course she would come take care of me, especially when I was hurt. Well, after a while, the nurses started asking me more questions because they wanted me to go into surgery as soon as possible. They asked if it was possible I was pregnant, did I drink, did I do any drugs. All of them quickly answered with a negative, because I was a good girl who never did anything wrong. But when they asked if I smoked, and felt my stomach drop, oh no, I looked at my mom, I looked at my nurse, I looked at my mom, and then, after a way too long pause, I burst into gut-wrenching sobs, just snot and tears pouring down my face while I apologized to my mom over and over again, saying it was only one cigarette, and I promised to never do it again, and how I was so sorry. I was utterly beside myself. I have no idea what the nurse must have been thinking because I was too busy begging my mom to forgive me. Again, bless my mother, because she hardly batted an eye at the over-the-top confession, and was mostly just trying to calm me down. She never brought it up to me afterwards, and we never talked about it. I think she was worried I would burst into tears again. So that's the story of how I got history of smoking added to my medical file, apparently. 4. This has been a slow-burning disaster of my own making. It all started when I asked my mom for a favor. Just for age reference, I'm 19 and female, and my mom is 57. I'm casually into Pokemon cards, mostly for nostalgia, and because the last packs I ever opened were from Paldean Fates. A while ago I found this gorgeous box that was only being sold in Japan, the Flareon box with the cool deck holder inside. I couldn't easily order it myself, so I asked my mom, who has a plug in Japan, to help me get it. $103 later, she did. The box arrived, I opened a couple of packs with her. It was a nice moment. But that's only the beginning. Little did I know I created a monster. At first, she wasn't like obsessed. It actually took her a while to get there. Every now and then, she'd ask me what packs were cool and what was relevant, or what I wanted for Christmas and whatnot. Then she discovered Pokemon card openings on TikTok, specifically. Rip till you hit streams. And now that's our thing. We rarely open packs ourselves due to the inflation and disappearance of said packs and ETBs. So we just sit on TikTok watching some guy tear through boxes of Terrestrial Festival. She'll yell out, "Okay, one more pack, he's getting close." And then 10 minutes later, we'll pull an Evolution SAR and the spiral continues. Right now she's been on an insane luck streak. It went Leafeon, Jolteon, and Espeon 2 Glaceons in a row, and now Flareon is the latest, but her favorite Pokemon, Leafeon, especially since her favorite color is green. And it was one of the first bigger pulls she's ever gotten. Anyway, there was probably a good $1,000 or more into the endeavor with bills to pay, and an angry father and husband asking us to stop. But I do enjoy teaching her everything there is to know about the Pokemon world, and the fact that I've gotten my mom into a hobby we can both enjoy makes me extremely happy. I am truly grateful for the time we spent together, through crummy packs to the biggest of pools. So yeah, I messed up by asking my mom to help me buy a Japanese Pokemon box. Now she's a ripstream-watching, Leafeon-loving, pull-rate-calculating Pokefiend. Little edit. Mom and I are gargling over this sour Umbreon, as most people are. But I'm only worried about the bills part because one parent says we're broke, and the other is like, it's fine. Yes, I do help pay the bills, and I have a job of my own. But it is causing a bit of a fuss in my parents' marriage. 5. This happened a couple of days ago, but basically my wife and I started renting a new apartment in January. The previous tenant had been kicked out due to not paying rent for 6 months. So when we first got to see the place, there was still a bunch of the guy's furniture and stuff there. He had done a runner. Over the last few months, a cat has almost constantly been on our balcony. Super friendly, and always wanting attention. We have 2 young cats of our own, and they don't get along with it, constantly fighting through closed windows, and it has also been profoundly pooping in our pot plants, so it was kinda getting annoying. We started to suspect that perhaps it belonged to the previous tenant, as it was always outside on the balcony regardless of weather, with no visible spot for it to go to the bathroom or have cover on our neighbor's side. For more context, we are a 3rd story with a kind of wraparound balcony that is shared with the neighbor, who we rarely ever see at home. Only a small dividing fence that the cat has no issues just walking around. It cannot access any other levels though. We felt pretty bad for this cat as it had a slight limp and really went for food or water when we put it out. Anyway, a few days ago I spontaneously thought stuff it and took it to the vet, conveniently right next to our building, just so we would know if it was the previous tenant or not. If it was, we would take it to a shelter so it could have a proper home. Otherwise, I was just going to quietly put it back on the balcony and assume the neighbors must be feeding it and just a bit neglectful. My wife has bad anxiety, so I didn't want to make any issues of it. Hence why I didn't go over and ask, just in case it was theirs. I got to the vet, briefly explained the situation, and the lady took the cat into the back to check its details. About 5 minutes later, she came out and said, "Yep, I've called and confirmed it's your neighbor's cat. They are coming down to collect it now." Well, I crapped myself. I asked her not to say it was me that brought the cat, and asked if I could leave the cat carrier there and run home. She was cool with it, but on my way up to my apartment I ran into my neighbor on the stairs and could not make eye contact. Too big of a coincidence for her to know it wasn't me. There is no way the cat could have got to ground level or be found by anyone else. We haven't seen the cat since. My wife is anxious and convinced the neighbors have been giving her dirty looks when she's seen them on the street. Update. I have since gone over to the neighbors last night and gave an awkward confession and apology. Turns out they are really nice and were actually grateful as they've been unable to catch it and bring it inside. They were very understanding and were able to laugh at how awkward and embarrassing I felt about it. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Embarrassing Stories, episode 115. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button if you'd be so good, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you'd like to support the channel, there's ways to do that. You can do that by signing up for my Patreon page, or buying yourself some merchandise from the Hellfreezer merchandise store. Both of those are linked for you in the description. Okay, no more bits and bobs today, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And just out of curiosity, those of you who have pets, what do you own? Cat, dog, something a little more exotic? Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before I go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Embarrassing Stories 114, and was about books you've bought and forgotten about. I cited a book called The Last Human that I have purchased. It's part of my book collection, and it had completely slipped my mind the other day when I looked at it. Although I do remember buying it on a whim one night, thinking, oh, that's a pretty good price, I think I'll buy that now. Still haven't gotten around to reading it. One day I will have the time when I'm not overrun with work, when I'm not overrun with stress, to just sit down and read for pleasure again. That would be so nice. But until then, today's answer comes from, let's see, M. Lee. When looking at my bookshelf, I tend to forget more when someone has given me a book, not so much if I buy the book myself. For example, I have a classic collection of poetry book that more than once I'll walk by and ask, when did I get that book? Then remember, oh yeah, so-and-so gave me that last Christmas or for my birthday. I really need to read it. Thank you very much for your answer, M. Lee. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.